Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR. I've got a lot to talk about going on in the Big Ten. No, it's not Thursday night. It is Sunday night, but we have Big Jeff with us here on Sunday night. You're going to get less data from Jeff tonight, but should still be a very good show. Zach is serving another suspension. Just can't keep him away from the suspensions. He's actually got two more next week. So Jeff, you came in, you saved the day. We appreciate you having you here.
Great to be here. My son had their spring football game in Georgia. He plays for a high school team in Georgia. Just real brief, we scored a touchdown to make it 17-16 in the fourth quarter. Had a kid from the soccer team come in. He was new, kicked the extra point. He drilled like a bend it like Beckham line shot, and it shocked the refs so much they weren't even expecting something like that, and they called it no good. And everyone who took film of it and everything clearly showed it cleared the upright. So we lost 17-16,
Oh
but it
my
should have been
goodness.
a tie score. Yeah, true story there. Just to add to,
Wow.
yes, football in
Wow.
Georgia.
Yeah. It's dramatic stuff down there in Georgia. But we're glad to have you here. So send our condolences to your son for missing out on that one. That'd be a tough one.
Spring game records don't count though. It was,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's true. That's true. We got Philip here. Philip says indefinite suspension for Zach. Yeah, it's going to be interesting because this Tuesday night episode is going to be the last episode that Zach and I have together for a couple weeks because Zach's coming back Tuesday night. The entire next week, he is off. And then the entire week after that, I am off. So you'll have me with guests, maybe Jeff, maybe somebody else. We'll see what Jeff can do. If Jeff can be here, we'll have Jeff on. But we'll do that, and then I don't know if Zach will have Jeff on or somebody else. I'm just gonna leave it up to him, whatever he wants to do. So, but yeah, we will. He will be back, just not back with me for at least a couple weeks. Max says Jeff stepping up as co-host, crucial talent depth at the Big Ten Huddle. Oh yeah, we got
Gotta
all
have the
kinds
two
of
deep.
talent depth here.
Yep. Develop the two deep for more success, as we all know.
There we go. Gotta have that too deep. Asian Posh Doreen says, Happy Sunday. Happy Sunday. Doreen, thanks for being here. We appreciate that you are here. And Doug says, Good evening, everyone. Doug, glad to have you here. Billy Tuesday, howdy, folks. Howdy, Billy Tuesday. Appreciate you being here. Well, we got a couple of Buckeyes here in the chat. Got our Illinois fans, Indiana fans, I'm sure, as well, even if they're not saying anything. Well, Philip is our Illinois fan. It says, Zach will be on probation when he returns. Yeah, Zach better not mess up. He might serve a longer suspension if he messes up. So, all right, Jeff, we got a lot to get to in this show. We are going to get to this. I don't want to give it too much away yet, but there is an idea out there that Sherrone Moore will most likely serve more than just 2 game suspension from Michigan. So we're not so much going to talk about if that's going to happen, but we will give our thoughts on what do we think Michigan should do if that happens, right? You can tell it's the slow season because we're kind of like making up scenarios here now, which is really interesting. But we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about Brett Bielema, what he had to say recently about NIL. There's a college football playoff conference compromise potentially happening. We'll talk about that, and then we'll finish out the show with our 3 locks. Each of us will have 3 locks in the Big Ten win totals that we're going to give you. So, Jeff, you ready to hit the first segment?
Yeah, let's hit it.
All right, here we go. Sherrone Moore is serving a 2 game suspension from the Nebraska game, and I believe, what is it, the third game of the season? Is that the Central Michigan game? I believe it is. So he's serving a 2 game suspension from Michigan this year. I didn't think anything, I didn't think much of it. I thought, okay, this is Michigan trying to get out in front of it. Well, lately we've been hearing some people who have been talking about the Michigan kind of punishments and sanctions and stuff like that, who maybe had a stance before, kind of changed that stance a little bit. And so it's interesting. And then I actually was reading an article the other day where the writer, and actually a Michigan writer, so I'm not like trying to take shots at Michigan here or anything like this. I felt like this was not a shot at Michigan because a Michigan writer was talking about it, where he was saying that he thinks it's a possibility that Sherrone Moore could possibly serve a year show cause from college football and what Michigan should do in that situation. If you don't know why Sherrone Moore is suspended, he had deleted text messages. We still have no idea what's in those text messages. It's assumed it had something to do with the scandal or something like that because it was deleted on the day everything started coming out about Connor Stallions. However, Sherrone Moore says that he was just so upset he deleted it. It's kind of he said, she said. Again, not trying to get into all of that, but I do want to get into number one, Joel Klatt kind of changing his tune a little bit on the Michigan stuff. He was kind of all like, it doesn't mean anything, it doesn't do anything. Now he's talking about potential punishment. Josh Pate was very indifferent on it for a little while. He kind of leaned into it's not anything there for a little bit. And then now he's saying it is a big deal. Not a big deal, but a somewhat big deal to him. And then in addition to that, like I said, the Michigan writer that was throwing out the idea of a possible 1 year show cause for Sherrone Moore and what Michigan should do in that situation and what that might mean for the program. So, Jeff, I'm going to send it to you first here. If, say, Sherrone Moore gets a 1 year suspension, show cause, whatever we want to call it, if he gets that, what do you think Michigan should do? Because I would put them in a very interesting situation with a coach that I think Michigan fans were happy with the first year, right? They beat Ohio State, they beat Alabama, but you still wonder there could have possibly been more, right? That QB situation definitely falls on Sherrone Moore that he didn't go out and get a transfer quarterback. However, like I said, they also had highs in that season as well. So, what are your thoughts about a potential 1 year suspension / show cause for Sherrone Moore and what Michigan should do?
Well, the first thing I want to say is, I listened to my Michigan podcast during the year. Up until that Ohio State game, they were really, really not happy with him. I mean, it was pretty bad, the evaluation, and especially the quarterback, how they didn't handle that correctly. When, they went through spring with those quarterbacks and they should have known that they weren't good enough. And you've got the transfer portal that you can execute to improve that position. So I just wanted to say that. But then everything changed, if you tune into X at all or read it, it's all about we won 4 in a row. And so that just almost forgave all evils. And then beating Alabama was icing on the cake. But even if they wouldn't have beat Alabama, if they would have just looked good playing Alabama's last, that Ohio State win, it completely changed the perception of Sherrone Moore. My thoughts on this is, all along from Harbaugh to the Michigan administration, they've been just basically fighting the NCAA tooth and nail, not giving in, not cooperating in some cases. So my take is there's no way they would get rid of Sherrone Moore, even with the 1 year show cause, because that would be kind of they would look at it as we're giving in to the NCAA. Like, you guys kind of beat us, right? You won, we're going to go a different route. So I don't believe at all that they would do that. So Sherrone Moore is still going to be the coach, and especially because he got that win against Ohio State. It might be different, and I think maybe it would be different if they would have got blown out by Ohio State. This would have gave Michigan the easy excuse to say, yeah, let's move on from him. But given the situation, I feel there's no way they would do that, because it would kind of give the NCAA the satisfaction that, yes, you beat us in essence, right? The other thing I would say, when I think of replacements, I don't think of Wink Martindale, the DC, or even the offensive coordinator would do it, because I think they want those guys focused on developing strong game plans on the offense and defense. And they hired this guy, Biff Poggi, who ironically they played Indiana last year. He was the head coach at UNC Charlotte, played Indiana, and the guy on the sideline looked like he was wearing, something out of a Rocky Balboa, movie, Sylvester Stallone movie, where it was all ripped up sweatshirt and everything. Anyway, that guy is an experienced coach, though. He is the current associate head coach at Michigan. Now, he's new this year, but I looked him up. He's had a
was with
connection
Harbaugh
to
for a year or two.
Yeah, for a couple years. So he's familiar with Michigan. I see them taking someone like him, because the other thing is, even if Sherrone Moore has the show cause, I don't think he can be even on campus or anything, but he can be behind and with modern technology, kind of pulling some of the strings. And he want a guy in position that he could influence on what he should be doing. So he wants someone to be like kind of a puppet for him. And I would think a Biff Poggi would be a good puppet, if you will, for Michigan. So that's what I think would happen. I think they wouldn't get rid of him, and they would name someone like this Biff Poggi as the standing coach. He has head coaching experience, right? And then keep your coordinators doing what they should be focused on, which is game planning.
Yeah, I gotta be honest, and maybe this is just me. I'm lower on Sherrone Moore than some other people are, right? I'd get rid of him. If that happened, I'd get rid of him and I'd go out and I'd hire a super awesome head coach. I'd steal him from somebody that's already having success elsewhere. I'd bring in somebody that has head coaching experience and let them kind of navigate all this stuff. We saw what happened with what's his name, Bill O'Brien in the Penn State situation, and Michigan's not going to get the sanctions that Penn State got. I'm not trying to compare them in that situation. I'm just saying Bill O'Brien was somebody that came in and was a quarterback guru that was able to get that position right and really put it together, and that kind of helped Penn State get to that next step where they were able to get through some of the things they were going through. Again, I'm not comparing Michigan to Penn State and saying that Michigan will get the same sanctions that Penn State has. I'm just saying, to me, you need somebody that you can make sure you get that quarterback position right. And one of two things that happened with Sherrone Moore last season: either one, he had no idea that the talent was as bad at the quarterback position as it was, or he really thought it was good. Like, he really thought this is a good position and we're in a good position here. Either one is bad, in my opinion. So, in my opinion, Michigan can do better than Sherrone Moore. I said Sherrone Moore was the right hire at the time when Harbaugh moved on. A lot of that was because of the timing of when Harbaugh moved on. I get it. Like, he was the right hire at the time. You just won a national championship. You brought him in. But I got to be honest. That team should have done so much more last year if they had a competent quarterback. You didn't. You didn't have a competent quarterback and you didn't have receivers. Now, again, everything is icing on the cake because you beat Ohio State, you beat Alabama, and if Michigan fans tell me, no, we want to keep Sherrone Moore because he beat Ohio State and Alabama, I can't really argue with you all that much, other than, to me, the quarterback position is the most important position on the field, and Sherrone Moore absolutely fumbled it in that way last year. Now, he got Bryce Underwood. That's really good for him, and he brought in Chip Lindsey, and I think that was a good move as well to bring in Chip Lindsey. However, that was also a really, I don't want to say, it was a unique circumstance, right? Larry Ellison gave all that money for them to be able to use it in the transfer portal and in recruiting, which, smoke them if you got them. That's what you got to do nowadays. Nobody should be taking shots at other teams for spending money. We're going to talk in the next segment about teams possibly spending $35 million to $40 million on rosters. So nothing wrong with that there. But would Sherrone Moore have been able to fix the quarterback position, fix the quarterback situation without that? I'm not so sure he would have. And if I'm somebody like Michigan, I want to go get somebody who, one, protects the offensive line, protects the defensive line, does all that stuff, but can also go out and get you good quarterback play and can identify that. Yeah, so that's pretty much my point. I might be on an island there. Feel like I've been on an island this entire time about Sherrone Moore, and I get it. Michigan fans like him because he beat Ohio State and Alabama. I'd probably like a head coach too if he beat Michigan and some other really good team. But am I off base, Jeff? Am I completely crazy?
No, and these are opinions, right? So we don't have any proof and everything for sure on what will happen. One thing I would agree with you with, if they would name a year, Michigan would at least explore who else could we get and approach some people that would be like, quote, the home run hires, even though I don't believe there's ever a true home run hire. There's very few that, but there's no doubt they would explore that. And if they felt they had an alternative that clearly would come to Michigan and would be better, I think you're right. They would pursue that. I just question whether they would find that home run hire, the one for sure, right, would be better. Because the one thing you can say about Sherrone Moore, he's been part of, he's 1-0 against Ohio State, right? Or is he 2-0 technically? I don't know, because filled in
2-0,
for
1-0.
Harbaugh
He
last
hasn't
year.
lost. That's
But
all I know.
but he was there for several years and have seen what's worked against them, and that's a pretty powerful thing. And obviously, Michigan fans, I think they care more about beating Ohio State than even the national title, according to some of them. I don't believe most of them think that way because it doesn't make logical sense, actually, in my view. But because the ultimate goal is to win the championship, not to beat your rival, even though that's an important goal. So I can't say you're wrong, JR, though. They definitely would explore looking for that home run hire. I'm just doubting that there would be one that's so apparent, like, oh, clearly. And Michigan does care about, they've been burned before of hiring, Rich Rodriguez, who huge success at a school like West Virginia that, doesn't have a lot of success. And why wouldn't he work at Michigan, right? And turned out to be a disaster. And yet Rich Rod went on to other schools and was successful. So there's risk in not getting the right fit for Michigan. And so that would be a risk of going outside, but I can't say you're wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I just look around the country and see coaches that I think could do well at Michigan that aren't currently there. And I know he gets his name brought up all the time, and I get that. But I really think Matt Campbell would do a good job at Michigan. Like I know I'm higher on him than most other people are, and I get it. I think PJ Fleck could do a pretty good job at Michigan. I get it, like the kind of quirkiness a little bit, kind of rubs people the wrong way. I get that, but I don't know. I look at Ryan Day and Dan Lanning and say those guys as first year head coaches, those guys are not the rule. Like you're not guaranteed to get that kind of stuff from those guys. Those guys are more often the exception and not the rule. And look at Ohio State with Ryan Day. Like up until winning a national championship, a lot of the fan base wanted him fired.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, it's always a sticky situation. I guess at the end of the day, if you're a Michigan fan, you're probably happy that Sherrone Moore beat Ohio State and beat Alabama, and so you got a good taste in your mouth, and you go from there. So, all right, good conversation there. We'll see what happens. There is supposed to be and the other thing I wanted to bring up, I was just talking to somebody on Twitter about this. The other thing is there is some speculation out there that there is thought that Michigan could be having Sherrone Moore and other coaches kind of fall on the sword for them. So that way all the punishments go to a Sherrone Moore or a Jim Harbaugh, which wouldn't really affect Michigan because in the NFL now, Jesse Minter, that kind of stuff. I've seen some people talk about it. I have no idea if it's true or not. Honestly, like if I'm just looking at this in a logical way and not thinking about the morality of it at all, which that's kind of what we do in college football sometimes, it's a good move. If that's the move, it's a good move because then Michigan wouldn't face any type of punishment or anything like that, and everything would just go to longer show cause for Jim Harbaugh, show cause for Jesse Minter, and then Sherrone Moore would be out. But as I talked about, like I think you can find a coach of Sherrone Moore's ability or better out there. I don't think that's exclusive to find. Do you have any thoughts on Michigan maybe having
Yeah,
Sherrone Moore fall on
I
the
would
sword
just,
for him?
I mean, Michigan's trying to control the narrative and control. This gets back to that they've been very uncooperative, right? So I think, but for example, more them choosing the self suspension for 2 games of game one and game three and leaving game two because he used to play at Oklahoma. That just looks bad. I mean, that's just like slapping the NCAA in the face. Like, and they're trying to control the narrative and control how they're going to be punished. And I think the NCAA is not going to want to go for that. Then again, you've got the NCAA worried about all the litigation, everything, and how much power do we really have. So unfortunately, it's a royal mess. I hate it actually, because it's not talk about football; it's talk about other stuff. So I hate the whole thing. I mean,
Yeah.
I must say, but you have to talk about it because it's such a well, it happened, right, and you can't sweep it on the rug because then basically you're kind of giving in to Michigan then and letting them win in this case, right? So it's just messy.
And it does eventually affect the product on the field. So,
Yeah.
it all comes back to it. So, all right, interesting conversation there. Again, off-season talk. That's kind of how it goes. Dorian reminds you, like the show. Thank you, Dorian. Please do like the show. Helps us out. Helps more people find the Big Ten Huddle, and ultimately, that is very much appreciated. All right. Brett Bielema reveals some of the NIL landscape that maybe some people are not too sure about. So, Brett Bielema went on Sirius XM College Football Radio, and he talked about the NIL landscape so far. He discussed the House settlement, how it impacts college football. He anticipates major changes to be coming, not this year, but major changes to be coming. He notes that there are major disparities in NIL, which I think most people know about this, but it's interesting coming from a coach like Brett Bielema, of some teams spending anywhere from $35 to $40 million on their roster, while Brett Bielema claims that he only spent $5 million on their roster in a conference that last year exceeded $20 million for many of the teams that were above them. Now, he said all four teams that were above him. I don't believe that Indiana spent more than $20 million on their roster. Maybe they did. I just don't believe it. But he views unregulated NIL as just completely lacking oversight, completely lacking in so many different areas. It really helps those who are, the richer in college football, and it tears down the teams that cannot accomplish as much. I get where Brett Bielema is coming at here, Jeff. I think obviously he's trying to maybe gain a little bit of brownie points, right? Like these teams, they were spending over $20 million on their roster. Look at us, we only spent $5 million on ours. We still got 10 wins, right? So it's really, really interesting. I'm curious what your thoughts were. Oh, and I should also say, Kirk Cinetti said something like this a while back. I didn't bring it up because at the end of the day, it felt like Kirk Cinetti was kind of shooting from his hip on that one. And sometimes Kirk Cinetti says things. Listen, I like Kirk Cinetti a lot. Sometimes he says things just to say things. I wonder because he he said they kill top 25 teams. They haven't beat a top 25 team yet, but he also goes out and says other teams are spending over $20 million, 35, $40 million. I think it's more relevant now. We have a second coach talking about this, which confirms it a little bit more. What are your thoughts on the whole situation, Jeff?
But just now, I get the frustration. It is an unbalanced playing field. It's been that way for a long time, though, too. Let's not deceive ourselves and think, before NIL, it was still the haves and have-nots. It's just that maybe in certain cases it's been magnified more when you've got especially programs with some deep-pocketed backers, right, who are willing to spend money on that program. I mean, Oregon's there, but Ohio State has donors spread out where people willing to help feed the beast so that they can retain players more in the case of Ohio State. So I think Bielema was just expressing frustration. I think, the settlement will allow all Big Ten teams to offer kind of like that base salary is the way I would look at it to a lot of their football players, which is going to be a good thing, and allow the Big Ten to out recruit other conferences because Big Ten and SEC are going to give more from the pie that they're giving out from the TV revenue. I just don't, he's alluding to maybe a different NIL model. He referenced the NFL, and of course, the NFL has the salary cap, and the salary cap is the thing that really levels the playing field for everyone.
Collective bargaining too.
Yeah, and then even draft picks are slotted. Like when you're drafted first, there's not a lot of negotiation going on. It's within a certain area that what you're gonna get paid for the most part. So it really is a whole different animal. I can't see that type of thing happening. He was talking about, all college football teams should be shopping at the same mall. We should all be shopping whatever Target instead of the high-end retail stores that the bigger schools with the deep pockets can do. But I don't know how you control an NIL without like a salary cap like thing. And the SEC and the Big Ten are not going to give up their financial advantage that they have over other conferences. So it'd be interesting. There was a lot of like, okay, tell me more. Like, if you know something more about something specific. I just have my doubts in the future that we're going to really get to more of like an NFL model or a salary cap model. But I do think the House settlement will be again, establish a base salary, which will be a good thing in essence for all the players and everything. But the haves are always going to have more than the have-nots. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
Yeah. Real quick, Connor says Nebraska was a top 25 team in the coaches poll when Indiana beat them 56-7. Connor, thank you. I stand corrected. I'll be honest, I do not pay much attention to the coaches poll. But that is a good point there. They were they were at least close to probably being in the top 25 of the AP poll if they were there in the coaches poll. So thank you, Connor. And maybe Kirk Cincinnati pays more attention to the coaches poll than I do. So thank you for that. I will say, to me, like, this more than anything here, number one, if Brett Bielema really did only spend $5 million on his roster and he got to 10 wins, like that's damn impressive. Like, that makes me feel even better about Brett Bielema than I did before. So props to you, Bert. Number two, I think, you didn't have coaches talking like this beforehand, right? You didn't have coaches talking like this a month or two ago. Now we got what sounds like Nick Saban in politics now, working with this. He's in with Donald Trump, and whatever your feelings are on Donald Trump, that's fine. I'm not trying to get into a presidential thing here. I'm just saying that Trump has seemed to put Nick Saban in a higher position here to work on this stuff. And as much as, yes, Nick Saban, SEC and stuff like that, he's still one of the dudes that's been around in college football the longest of anybody alive, coaching in it, analyzing it now, all these different things. So if there's a guy for the job to be able to go out and look and see what can we do so things are fair. That's all I hope, is that Nick Saban is actually working toward what is fair for other teams and other coaches and players. Now, as you said, Jeff, it's probably never going to be completely fair. The haves are always going to have more. The have-nots are always going to have less. But I think Indiana and Illinois are examples of Big Ten teams that if you try harder, if you put more into your program, you can succeed more. You can go out and get a good coach. You can go out and get good players and entice them to come to your university. I just looked today, and Indiana has a higher recruiting class than Auburn right now. Indiana, higher than SEC Auburn. That's absolutely crazy that they're doing that. But they can do it because, one, Kirk Cincinnati is a really good coach. He's a good recruiter. And two, they're funneling money into that program to try and get it to be better because Indiana's tired of being a bottom tier team in the Big Ten. More props to them. I am always going to praise the teams that say we're not satisfied with being a bottom tier team. We want to be a top tier team in the conference because it makes the conference better and it gives me better football to watch. So props to you, Cignetti. Props to you, Bielema. Any thoughts on the whole Nick Saban thing? Do you think this is what he's alluding to at all here? Brett Bielema is, Jeff?
Yeah, that's hard to know. Whenever they talk about that, they're talking about trying to have a pseudo, college football czar, if you will. I just don't believe the SEC and the Big Ten will ever agree to that because that's ceding power. And right now, why would you cede the power when you have it, right? I mean, through the history of the world, that just doesn't happen, whether you're talking sports or anything, right? People just don't cede power. So, but I do think the SEC and Big Ten are at least reasonable and do recognize, having the other conferences still be competitive and giving them their shot is a good thing overall. I just don't think they ever want it to be a level playing field. So it's like, where's the balance there? And you're even seeing that in this playoff format, right? Where the Big Ten and SEC are, proposing 4 teams for each of them in a potential 16-team playoff field because they have the power to do that, right? And at least float it out there. The worst that can happen is everyone protests and then you negotiate. But notice the Big Ten didn't come out and the SEC say, yeah, all the Big Four will get 3 each. They didn't do that, right? Because they've got the power. So I do think if someone coming in where they can do policies where you rein in how crazy this is, and I actually think the bigger deal is determining player movement. And right now it's just completely out of control, where literally every year a player could be a free agent, and you have some players be like, oh, I'm going to transfer this school, I went through spring, didn't like what I saw, I'm going to come back to my other program. I mean, it's insane what's going on here. That's the kind of stuff that I think everyone would like to see reined in, from a coach's perspective, a fan's perspective, because you don't know who's who. And it's nice to get a player through your program for all 4 years that you get to know well, right? Versus these mercenary players coming in. And I know that I'm an Indiana basketball fan, and their basketball team this past year was a bunch of mercenary players, with some that were recruited, but it didn't feel good as an Indiana fan. I can tell you that. So hoping that makes sense. What I'm saying is someone to come in to take the worst things that are going on now and addressing those. But again, the SEC and the Big Ten are not going to go for anything that truly is what Bielema would like to see, which is more like a level playing field, a salary cap like structure to prevent someone from spending 35 to 40 million on a roster, which he knows Illinois won't be able to do, even though, to your point, JR, Illinois should be better than a 5 million, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. Joe, completely agree with you. You said the NCAA has made such a mess that it should be abolished. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, just needs to start over from the ground up, because right now the NCAA, they've just completely let so much run rampant. That's why, to a certain extent, like, I even find it comical about the NCAA is like gonna go do anything to Michigan, because it's like, so you care about this, but you don't care about that. Like, at a certain point, it's like either enforce the rules or don't. And I realize, some Buckeye fans might not like it that I say that, and I get that, but at a certain point, the NCAA is just kind of useless now. They pick and choose what they want to take on, what they don't want to take on, what they can go to court for, what they can't go to court for, and it's completely ridiculous. So hopefully something will come of this. That's why I am rooting for this House settlement, because it sounds like there's actually a group of coaches or somebody together. If the NCAA, all they want to do is take care of, like, on field cheating and recruiting violations or whatever else, like, that's fine. Let them be the department for that. But don't have them be in charge of tampering and NIL and all that stuff, because obviously they're not equipped well enough to do it, and they don't know what they're doing. So they gotta figure that out somehow. So, all right. There's one other comment I wanted to bring up. Max says it used to be coaches hinting at recruiting violations by their competitors. Now everyone can just be honest and tell everyone what they are paying. Well, it's that, and you got really good like reporters out there now going out and finding this stuff. I remember back when the tattoo gate happened with Ohio State, every single reporter for ESPN was on that case because it was such a huge story. Nowadays, obviously there's still reporters digging on like Michigan stuff and things like that, but you got so many reporters that are trying to go out and figure out NIL deals, right? And it turns into a huge thing. Jackson Cantwell just committed to Miami, and the rumor is that he got $2 to $2.5 million, somewhere in that range. Is that true? I don't know. Did a person say it that's normally right about NIL stuff? Yup. Do I believe it? Yup. Because that's what Miami does. And Miami fans are crying and being upset because, other people said, "Oh, the only talk about is us with money. They don't talk about anybody else." Yada yada. Have you paid attention to Texas? Have you paid attention to Oregon? Have you paid attention to Ohio State? That's all the talking points are with those teams, because people don't like that they have more money than them. You just had Brett Bielema talking about the 3 teams ahead of them in the Big Ten, or the 4 teams ahead of them in the Big Ten. We're all spending $20 million or more on their rosters. So it's crazy. And there has to be something that comes in charge. Until then, Bert's just gonna do his best to keep rolling, and I'll be rooting Bert on. If he's taking on 35 to $40 million rosters with his $5 million roster, sue me. I love an underdog. All right, anything else on that, Jeff, before we move on?
no, I'm probably good. Other than I'm still shocked that when the Ohio State AD said we're spending $20 million, and just think that's all the narrative was, is Ohio State's 20 million, 20, and they did it to themselves. They were the ones who revealed the number. It still baffles me that guy said that. What a major mistake.
Did he think it was gonna be like good news? Did he think
I
people
don't
would be
know
like,
what.
"Oh wow,
I think
congratulations"?
he just made a major mistake. I'm sure he would have taken
Yeah,
that back, because yeah, that
I'm sure he
was.
would have too. All right. One more segment, and then we will hit a commercial break and then come back and talk about the win total. So, the college football playoff conference compromise. So, last Monday, Ross Dellinger put out some information about the college football playoffs and how they are moving to a 16 team structure. This has been a big talking point. We just did our show, me and you, Jeff, on Thursday night about if the 16 team playoff was from the beginning, what would it look like? Well, Ross Dellinger blesses us with a tweet on Saturday, as I'm pulling it up right now, hoping that it comes up, where essentially he says, here's what it says. This is Ross Dellinger's tweet. The four power conferences or conference commissioners met today for a second time in the last 10 days as they continue to explore a variety of 16 team playoff models, including a compromise for the Big 12 and ACC discussed in the story below. In his story, he talks about a number of different models that it could be. Obviously the ACC and the Big 12, they both want 3 automatic bids instead of 2. Their argument is look at the past, and just because something is one way in the past doesn't mean it's going to be in the future. So not only are they advocating for more automatic bids, but they're trying to put parameters in place. That's where the discussion came up about the TV viewership, right? Whoever gets the most TV viewers, like that conference, it wasn't whoever has the most TV viewers makes the playoffs. It was whichever conference has the most TV viewers, they get more automatic bids for the playoffs. I think that was misconstrued a little bit to some people. I mean, there has to be something here in place, because you can't just say, oh, it's going to be this way forever and that's the only way it is, because of course the Big Ten and the SEC are going to dominate if they have 4 automatic bids and the other conferences only have 2. Like, of course more players are going to want to go to the Big Ten and the SEC rather than the ACC in the Big 12. However, I don't see the Big 12 and the ACC actually having the leverage to do anything here. I put in my notes, Jeff, I could see a model of, instead of 4-4-2-2-1, which is 4 for the Big 10, 4 for the SEC, 2 for the ACC, 2 for the Big 12, and 1 for Group of 5 automatic bids. I could see them moving to the 4-4-3-2-1, which is essentially the ACC. This model would, this is what it says in his article. It says this model reduces the at-large pool from 3 to as little as 1. The 1 would presumably be designated to Notre Dame if the Irish finish inside the top 16, saying that Notre Dame could be included in that ACC bid if they finish in the top 16. I don't know why the ACC would do that. They don't get any of the money from the ACC or from Notre Dame making the college football playoffs. Maybe they're going to figure something out with that. But this sounds like a mess, Jeff. I mean, I would like to see maybe some kind of compromise made, because I don't want to see it just turn into Big Ten and SEC and everybody else is gone. But if the ACC and the Big 12 don't do what the Big Ten and the SEC want, they have no problem with moving on, because that's where the money is. That's where the TV viewership is. What are your thoughts on all this, Jeff?
So first I'd say, some think the Big Ten and the SEC are trying to make it appear like they're working with everyone on a new model, but there's a question of how serious are they really about it, because ultimately some feel they want to go off on their own anyway, right? But they don't want to look like the bad guy either. So a theory is this proposal is a way for the Big Ten and the SEC to make it appear like they're trying to work with everyone to come up with a model that's satisfactory. But when they're asking for 4 teams each versus 2 for Big 12 and ACC, to the average fan, it would look like a power play. And yeah, they're kind of working together, but they're leveraging their full power. What's interesting about it, though, is from our podcast last Thursday, where we looked at the last 11 years of what a 16-team field would look like if it were 4 each auto qualifiers for SEC and Big Ten, and then the 2 and 2 for ACC and Big 12. Based on how the committee voted, that layout of 4-4-2-2 actually was about right. I had shown that maybe it was actually the Big 12 could argue that they got rankings from the voting committee in the top 16 a little more often, where maybe they could argue for a third team. But I had said the one conference that couldn't argue for more than 2 seeds based on 11 years of history, and granted, that might not necessarily repeat itself, was the ACC, though. The ACC had Clemson with some truly, dominant teams that were great with one losses or no losses even. But then after that, because Florida State and Miami have not performed as typically over the last 10 years in general, there was a huge drop off to that second team in the ACC. Often that second team in the ACC is a 3-loss team, right? And 3-loss teams are not exactly rewarding excellence. So, to me, that made me feel better about that 16 team as far as fairness. Now, to Jerry, your point, the ACC and the Big 12 are arguing, well, that's assuming the next 10 years is going to look like the prior 10 years. That's what they would probably be saying to me if, they were hearing me say that. But until we see evidence that contradicts that, that model works well for me. And if, we go ahead and implement that, and then it becomes apparent that the ACC is getting screwed, I think there'd be arguments to adjust it. And the committee has shown willingness, even based on last year, for example, and how the seedings went, dissatisfaction with it and a want to maybe make some changes. So I don't think if they agree to the 4-4-2-2-1 model that would be set in stone and it's the next 10 years like that, right? I think there's enough people that know that we need to tweak these things as it goes along. But I think, the ACC and the Big 12 are just going to fight for, their jobs are to fight for their conference and get the most teams in. But the Big Ten and the SEC, who have the power, their jobs are to get the most teams in. And that's why they're fighting for the auto qualifiers for their conference, right? And the Big Ten and the SEC has the power that we just talked about there. So, it will be interesting to see how this shakes out, because it looks like it's unfair. But again, based on results for the last 10 years, it's actually a pretty good layout for how many teams should get in by conference, in my opinion, and the data supports that.
Yeah, I mean, the ACC really does have a leg to stand on here when you look at the data, like what we looked at, right? We looked at so much, back. Well, you looked at it more than I did, and from everything you had to say and from what I said that we saw was that the ACC did not deserve more teams in most of the time. Maybe a couple years here and there, but most of the time the ACC was actually getting teams outside of the top 16. And that's not the goal, right? The goal is to get automatic qualifiers for teams in your conference that deserve to be in. But when what was the one team? Was it Louisville one year was like 24th or something like
Yeah.
that, and they would
I
have
mean,
been
I have up here like 2023, Florida State was 13-0, of course, and they didn't get into the
right.
top
They should have been
four.
in. Yeah.
But then the next highest team in the ACC that year was Louisville, ranked 15th by the committee, and they were 10-3. That's the second best ACC team, 15th ranked in 10-3. That's the problem for the ACC. They don't have great teams. Now, maybe Miami and Florida State can right themselves, and between them and Clemson, they've got 3 teams acting like blue bloods should, right? But it hasn't been happening the last 10 years. So, to your point, that means right now they don't have a lot to argue on.
Yeah, for sure. And also too, I mean, teams like let's just be honest, and ACC fans will hate me for saying this, and I get it. That's fine. This isn't an ACC show though, so I'm not going to pander to the ACC fans. Teams in the ACC don't care. Teams in the ACC do not care about football like teams in the SEC and the Big Ten do. Now, I would still say there are more teams that care about football in the SEC than in the Big Ten. I'm not going to argue that at all. But at the same time, I think there are aspects of the Big Ten that make it better than the SEC. So I'm not trying to say the SEC is better in that way. I'm just trying to say they got more teams working for that. But Zach and I went through it on a call-in show one time. It was like, which of these teams actually care? I think we came up with 5 in the ACC that actually care about football. It was like Florida State, Miami, Clemson, Louisville, and like Syracuse. Like, I mean, maybe North Carolina. We were like, maybe North Carolina cares for hiring Bill Belichick, or was that just a publicity stunt to try to get people paying attention to your program more. If it was, I mean, yeah, you got more people paying attention to your program for the wrong reason, but you got more people paying attention to your program. So it's incredible to think about. At the end of the day, I would just still want one conference champion for each conference and have the committee and the rankers and everything else, have them all on the same page every year. If you can just get good rankers and a good committee together to choose teams, then I think we can make it work. But, that's also hard to do because not everybody's going to agree with the committee every single year.
Yeah.
So,
And as I've said, even in the last Thursday one, some automatic qualifiers I like because that's what all sports do. Like in the NFL, you can go 8-8 and win your division and you're in, right? And people don't bitch about it. Actually, it's kind of weird. If that happened in college football, people would be like going crazy. So, but just some element of automatic qualifier I'm fine with. You don't want so many though, where it's like you get there's an example for the ACC where they would have got an 8-4 team in to the field, right? A 4-loss team.
yeah.
I mean, come on. And it's the ACC, right? And not even they're getting 4 losses in a conference that's not even that tough, which really tells you how mediocre that 8-4 team is. So,
yeah. Oh, it was like North Carolina in basketball this last year, right? They played a pretty good out of conference schedule. It was one of the better ones in the country, but then they played in the ACC and it was like they didn't get any top 25 wins because all the teams in the ACC that were actually good teams, but then everybody else just stunk because they don't care. That's kind of the ACC for you.
Yeah, they had a good conference record, but yeah.
It's literally a conference of a mixture of group of 5 teams and teams that want to be in the national championship conversation. You got like 3 teams that want to be national champions in Clemson, Florida State, and Miami. To me, those are the ones that are spending the money to get there. You got some other teams that care, right? You got Syracuse, Louisville, North Carolina, I think does care. They just kind of went about it the wrong way with Bill Belichick. Well, I guess we don't know that for sure yet. We'll see what happens when the games actually start happening. But then everybody else,
I definitely, whatever model we have, any model that ends up, like I must say this, with only one at large would be horrible. I mean, the 3 gives you that flexibility. Let's say we went to the model with 4-4-2-2-1. ACC only gets 2 automated, but the ACC had an amazing year that there were Miami and Florida State and Miami, Florida State, and Clemson were all like dominant and only one. I guarantee you, one of those 3 is going to one of those 3 that was dominant like that, right? So the 3 at large will really take care of that, in my view. So a lot of this is just politicking and positioning, right, for the automatic qualifiers.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Hey, we're going to hit a commercial break really fast, and then we'll come back, and we will talk about win totals in the Big Ten. Jeff and I each have 3 locks. I even have a bonus lock for you that we will get to, and we will talk about just the general win totals in the Big Ten and everything. We'll be right back after this. Have you ever wanted to watch all 22 film, that film the coaches watch? Well, now you can. Introducing the Coaches Film Room. Over at Minutes to Sports, former college coach Zach Smith breaks down film of the most relevant teams in college football with a bit of a Big Ten lead. It's not free, so you'll need to sign up for the Colonel tier, which is $25 a month, but I can attest to you that it is far more worth it than that. With about 4 to 8 games per week, this is worth so much more money, not to mention Zach's analysis, making you a smarter football fan. Go check it out. The links are in the description, minutestosports.com. You won't be sorry. Back here on the Big Ten Huddle, I'll be honest, I haven't been paying a ton of attention to the chat today just because I've been trying to read off some notes and some other things that I had prepared. We really got the chat going, Jeff, with the whole Michigan.
Oh boy.
I mean, I knew there'd be people arguing, but yeah, they're really going for it today. So have at it in the chat. I'm not going to try to release you all unless somebody is just being really, really raunchy. So, all right. Like, subscribe, listen on podcasts after the fact. If you don't like listening on podcasts, you can always go here and just rewind to the end as well. Listen to the entire show. We appreciate it. We have Big Ten win totals, Jeff. So I kind of position these out a little bit so they're kind of the similar ranges, but I didn't have enough room to do it for all of them. So the top row is 10.5 win total. That is Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State. Then we have two that are at 8.5. That is Indiana and Michigan. We have five teams at 7.5. To me, that's the most interesting place with all this stuff. You have Illinois, Iowa, Nebraska, Washington, USC, and then you have one team with 6.5. That's Minnesota. Four teams at 5.5: Michigan State, Rutgers, UCLA, Wisconsin. One team at 4.5: Maryland, and two teams at 3.5: Northwestern and Purdue. Jeff, we'll get to the locks, but just kind of your overall take on the Big Ten win totals. What sticks out to you? What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I want to not comment too much just because so that we can cover that when we give our locks. But it is interesting. Illinois at 7.5 because way too early top 25 projections, and most people have them as a top 25 team, and yet Vegas is putting that at 7.5. So I could say a lot of people are looking at Illinois as the over. I do think they'll be over, but I'm not including them in my top three because it just be too easy. So that's the one that stands out to me the most. The others I'm not real surprised about. And the other thing to say is Vegas is really good at setting these numbers, because trying to come up with 3 locks for over and 3 locks for under is not an easy thing because they are so good at what they do.
Yeah, and it's amazing how just like one win in the win total really like makes you look that much higher in standing, right? Like
Yeah.
it does perplex me that Illinois is down at 7.5 and Indiana and Michigan are up at 8.5. I would think Illinois would be up in that 8.5 range, but Vegas has been doing this for a long time. I'm not gonna crap on them or anything. They obviously know how to make money. But it is very interesting to me that Illinois, after finishing fifth in the Big Ten last year, is down down there in that area. Maybe they're just betting on some people are going to say, oh, Illinois had a good season. They'll fall back to earth like they did 2 years ago.
No, none of that. Yeah.
Yeah, there could be some of that there. So yeah, we'll see. But anyway, all right, let's get to our locks, Jeff. So we're gonna give our locks over or under. It's your choice. I'll let you go first. Give us a lock for over or under for a team in the Big Ten.
All right. Do you want me to start with? Let me ask you. Should I start with my lower teams listed here or higher? What do we think would be
Give me
most?
your best lock first. Your best one.
I didn't quite do it that way, but I'm gonna go. Okay, I'm gonna go
Whichever one you
Oregon.
feel the most confident. You'd bet the
Yeah,
house on it, Jeff. All right.
yeah.
Whatever one you
Okay,
feel the most confident in.
okay. I'm going Oregon under. So they're at 10 and a
Wow.
half. I'm going Oregon under. So let
Okay.
me explain. First, so I looked at for all these teams, their Big Ten schedule this year. What was the team's record in conference last year? So Oregon is facing 9 teams whose record last year in the Big Ten was 44-37. So it's the 6th toughest schedule of the 18 Big Ten teams as far as in conference toughness of schedule. So that's number one. Their non-conference 3 games also, they have Oklahoma State, which I know they had a huge down year last year, but Oklahoma State actually has been pretty damn consistent program, so they could bounce back. And then a rivalry game against Oregon State, which you never know what happens. So that's one thing to look at. But I'm going to assume they go 3-0 there. And also of the top 6 Big Ten teams as far as win totals, they avoid playing Ohio State, Illinois, and Michigan, so that's pretty good. But the problem is 5 road games and only 4 home games. That's a big deal. Everyone remember, there's 9 conference games, but it rotates. Some years you have 5 home games and other years 4. And one difference in a home versus road game is huge, in my opinion. So they have 5 road games, and one of them is at Penn State. It's only the 5th game of the year, and Oregon's basically going to have a pretty inexperienced starting quarterback playing in a raucous environment at Penn State. And I'm putting that as an L. I'm putting that as a loss. I think they're going to lose there. And if you assume that that's a loss, Oregon can't lose another game if they're going to go over, right? If they're going to lose at Penn State, that means Oregon has to go undefeated the rest of the way to get to 11 wins and over. So that's kind of my simple reason is I just don't see that happening. I mean, Oregon, and don't get me wrong, I think they're going to go 10-2. I think they're going to make the playoffs because if you go 10-2 in the Big Ten, you're pretty much in the playoffs, in my opinion. But to win every game other than that Penn State, given, they lost a lot of players, and yes, they're very talented. But as we saw from Ohio State, think about how talented Ohio State was last year, and they went 10-2 in the regular season. They wouldn't have hit that over. So I don't want to belabor that and everything. That's my reasoning for Oregon under the 10.5.
Yeah, I mean, name of the game is just make the playoffs. Ohio State showed that last year. You can have an absolutely abysmal end of your season, and team, fans can want to fire the head coach, but you can still go win the national championship in this model. So it's just absolutely insane. So yeah, I mean, just get to 10 wins. If you're Oregon, you're in the playoffs, and that's what you need to do. I do think it's interesting because I do see a ton of people saying the Oregon schedule is weak this season, like it was last year. I think it's deceptively not. What am I trying to say? I think it kind of looks weak with some of the brand names on there a little bit, but it
Yeah.
is stronger, like you're saying. I
Yeah.
mean, yes, you get Indiana at home, but who's to say Indiana isn't better this year than they were last year, right? And if they are, they address those weaknesses. That's going to be a tough environment. And Kirk Cinetti saw what happened with needing a silent snap count and stuff like that, so they could adjust in that area. Wisconsin gave them a tough game last year. They'll be at home this year, but still, Luke Fickell, he kind of found, maybe found the formula to battle with them there. They're going to have to go all the way to Rutgers, right? That's going to be a tough road trip. I think they should win against Rutgers. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say Rutgers will beat them, but it's all the way across the country. That's a tough one. Iowa, I mean,
At Iowa.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, if Mark Gronowski is what Iowa fans,
If
are
that's a
saying
night
that he
game,
is, it's a night
grab your
game.
butts, man.
Yeah, I mean, Kinetic is no slouch playing there. And then finally at Washington. I mean,
In Washington
Washington's
was
got a very
undefeated at home
favorable.
last year, right? Undefeated at home
Yep,
last year,
undefeated. Yeah,
Washington.
second longest win streak at
Yeah.
home in college football. So
So, JR, I do think the perception is it's a weaker schedule because when you don't have Ohio State on there, it looks a lot easier. And they also don't have Michigan. And then Illinois is ranked fairly high, a top 25 team, although the 7.5 doesn't indicate it. So yeah, depending on what team you're not playing, it can tailor. But I think Oregon has just a bunch of good, solid teams they're playing. And when you play a bunch of good, solid teams, there's a good chance you slip up against one of them.
yeah, and I mean, I don't want to gloss over these teams either. Minnesota gave Penn State a heck of a game at the end of the season. Beat USC last year. I know USC wasn't great, but still, I mean, that's a team with talent, and they were able to beat them. And then USC on there as well. We know USC and Oregon fans are not too fond of each other, so that's basically a pseudo rivalry game there, if not a full on rivalry game. So, yeah, this
Yeah.
schedule is a little bit more difficult than I think some people are giving it credit for, and yeah, I'm not going to say Oregon under is a lock, but I can see what you're going for there. All right, my first lock, the one I feel most confident in. We've been talking about it. People in the chat are talking about it. It's Illinois at 7.5. Illinois got the schedule. Illinois has got the team. I mean, they've got everything right now. I don't see Illinois losing less than 9 games at this point. Call me crazy. That's fine, but you got Luke Altmaier, Brett Bielema did a fantastic job last year, and he's just a fantastic coach. They went out into the portal and got depth. That offensive line is together. The only thing I could see that could keep them from winning 9 games is if that offensive line just has a ton of injuries this next year and they're not able to sustain the same success with their depth, which would be unfortunate for them. They do need the receivers figured out for Luke Altmaier, but I think they will. So I mean, all Illinois has to do is win one of Washington, USC, at Indiana, or at Washington, USC, and at Indiana. I believe they can win one of those games. We'll have to. I think they could win 2 of those games, but at the very least, they'll win one of those games and have at least 9 wins. I believe. So, am I
Let me
crazy,
add,
Jeff?
let me add in Illinois from my records of teams that they played this year and their records from last year. Second easiest schedule within the Big Ten. So they play teams this year who last year had a 33-48 record, so 15 games below 500. Now, some of that, Ohio State on there, but Ohio State actually had 2 Big Ten losses. So, but for sure, the schedule looks pretty easy. I do think road games at Indiana, at Washington, like we talked about, they're real tough, and at Wisconsin, and if Fickle has them better, but certainly, I agree. I have them as over.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not convinced they're a playoff team. Is the bottom
Yeah,
line. Yeah.
we'll see, and some of that will be perception too. That's the hard part for a team like Illinois. They don't have the name brand status of a Penn State or Oregon or Michigan, so they're really gonna have to prove it, just kind of like Indiana did last year. So, all right, Jeff, what's your second best lock?
So, so I'm just going to just kind of go down the line here. So this is another under. Kind of surprising I'm going to do this, but Iowa at 7.5, I have them going 7-5. So I have them as the under. Second toughest schedule in the Big Ten. Play teams that were 47-34 last year. So really tough. Also, they play at Iowa State, and Iowa State can be up and down, but Iowa State's been up recently, and it's at Iowa State, and Iowa's record against Iowa State has not been real good. So when you figure they're going to come out of non-conference at potentially 2-1, that can make it tough to get to 8 wins, right? So, and of the top 6 teams, they play Penn State, Oregon, and Indiana. So 3 of the 6. They do have 5 home games, which is good. But one of the problems here too, taking into the schedule, the 3 worst rated teams and the 3 teams in that bottom row there that you have, JR, they don't play any of them. They don't play Northwestern, Purdue, and Maryland. So there's the problem for Iowa is there's no gimme games, and even I wouldn't even call some of those necessarily gimme games until we see them. But no bottom feeders. So the easiest game is home versus Michigan State, and Michigan State with that quarterback Childs, who knows, maybe they're a lot better. And then Minnesota is the second easiest game based on what I look like at home. So I love Kirk Ferentz and his staff. I think I was still going to be good. I see them going 7-5. They're going to go to a bowl, but I have them as the under.
Yeah, it's tough with Iowa because my big thing with them is we're gonna have to see how they progress throughout the year. There's people that aren't Mark Gronowski believers, and I get that. FCS quarterback coming in. I think the range of what he could do for this team is just so big. I think he could either just be absolutely fantastic and this offense could reach another level, and you see Iowa go, maybe 9-3 or something like that. I mean, that would be crazy with this type of schedule that you're talking about here. Or, I mean, I could also see him running around like crazy and, God forbid, but get hurt, right? That was what Iowa dealt with last year with Cade McNamara got hurt, and then Brendan Sullivan was running around so much he eventually got hurt. And then you had Jackson Stratton, and, that's kind of how it went. And so it was really, really interesting. If all the hype is real, which I mean, every team has hype right now coming out of spring. Every team thinks our roster is better than they were last year. Every team thinks that, we have a Heisman caliber quarterback, a Heisman caliber this, a Heisman caliber. And I'm not saying teams are wrong. I'm just saying there's a lot of optimism for every team right now. And the season will show, was that optimism warranted or not? Can Iowa fix their wide receiver situation? I think they've got some guys in there that can do it. It's just about actually doing it. Can Iowa, replace a ton of production, a ton of key players on their defense with more good players? Sounds like the culture, not the culture, but the attitude of some players wasn't the best last season, which is unfortunate for Iowa. If Kirk Ferentz can fix that, things can be better. Because I do believe that a better culture with somewhat worse players is better than a more talented culture with worse, or a more talented team with worse culture in some cases. So, all right, let's get to my next lock, which is you keep going on the unders. I'm going to keep going on the overs here, Jeff. So I'm the
Okay,
positive
let's
one
do it that way.
tonight.
Yeah.
Penn State over. I'm going to go Penn State over on this one. I think that Penn State does have a favorable enough schedule here, and I think that Drew Aller is going to be a big piece for them. It's not until their fourth game of the year when they play Oregon. It's kind of like last year with Ohio State, Oregon, but the difference here, Penn State gets them at home. Now, if it's at noon, I don't like it as much because I just don't think the home field advantage is as good at noon as it is obviously for a possible whiteout or something like that for Penn State, right? So, but I still think Penn State can get over this hump here with how much production they're bringing back, with how many good players they have. I do have some concerns in a few different areas, but I do like what Penn State did to address at least the pass rush and a couple of different things in the transfer portal. We'll see what it looks like, but I'm not going to say I'm picking Penn State to win the national championship yet or anything like that. I still got to figure out who my pick is for that. But I like who Penn State's bringing back. I like this big game for them against Oregon early in the season. I think if they lose a game, that loss would be to Ohio State. Ohio State just has more time to gel later in the season. And if Ohio State drops at Washington or at Illinois, you could see an Ohio State team with 2 losses and their backs against the wall, right? They lose to Texas and then they lose to either Washington or Illinois. They could be with their backs up against the wall, and it could be an interesting situation for Ohio State going against Penn State. Kind of like, not kind of, but similar to last year, right? Ohio State had their backs up against the wall against Penn State. They had to prove it. They had to prove they could be a top 5 team, and they went in there and they did that. So it could be that way again. We'll see. But regardless, Penn State, I'm gonna go over.
I like that call. I have Penn State going 11-1. I like them over. No tough non-conference games. Oregon at home early, and you already heard me saying I believe Oregon's going to lose to them. But a lot of it, Penn State with the experienced quarterback, Oregon not, and it's on the road. So that's what makes it really hard as a QB. And yeah, even if they lose to Ohio State, at Iowa will be a tough game for sure, as we've talked about. A sneaky game is at UCLA. So a week after the big Oregon home game, they got to go all the way across country and play a UCLA team. Maybe not super talented, but man, they played hard last year. So those are those games that after a big game and then you're go on the road. But I still like the 11-1 over call in my case as well, JR.
Awesome. A couple comments really fast, then we'll get to your third one. Max says, can James Franklin finally break through his historic ceiling? Jim Harbaugh broke through his 2 years ago with a bunch of players coming back. Ryan Day broke through his with a bunch of players coming back last year. I mean, it's a proven formula. James Franklin just has to do it. So we'll see. I think at the very least, if they just win the Big Ten this season, that'll be breaking through a ceiling for Penn State in my mind. Even though they did win it in 2016, but it's just been kind of bleak lately with that stuff. And then the other comment, Troy says, I've watched Aller play for a while and wonder what I'm missing. I ain't seen nothing. He says he's great. He's looked average. Yeah, I mean, I've been critical of Drew Aller, Troy. I'm not trying to sing his praises and say he's the best quarterback in the nation or anything like that. I do think that he does have a phenomenal arm. I think that we've seen some of those throws. I think we saw the one against Boise State in the back of the end zone that he hit Tyler Warren on. I think, if you watch his highlights, you see some just outstanding throws. He just has to do it more consistently, and he has to be willing to throw the ball downfield and not telegraph those throws. His biggest issues last season, think about the Oregon game, right? When he telegraphed, very first game or very first play of the drive there, when they were trying to go down and tie it up, he totally telegraphed that seam route along the sideline, and it got picked off because it looked like he decided where he was going to throw it beforehand. There were players at Ohio State that looked average when Jim Knowles got there, and they looked a whole lot better after Jim Knowles had a year or two with him. So Andy Kotelnicki, maybe Drew Aller looked average for most of last season. Andy Kotelnicki, if he keeps working and he's the coach that everybody thinks he is, he's going to show it this season. We'll see.
I don't disagree. He hasn't looked great, but I think the one thing you could clearly say is every year he's gotten better. So I would say, why wouldn't he get better from last year as well, including the consistency?
Better
So,
receivers
so
too.
we're not saying you're wrong, Troy, for sure, but when you see that progress each year in quarterbacking, it's the hardest position. It's not. My son at one time played it, and his brain's not programmed to. He played quarterback because he was running fast and everything, and was super athletic and just outrun people. Well, once you get to seventh and eighth grade, even you gotta understand when the blitz might be coming and all this stuff. And yeah, it's just not an easy position. So that's the one thing I would say. So I'm
For
not
sure.
expecting him to be awesome, but each year of experience is huge for quarterback more than any other position.
Well, we talked about it when we talked about is Drew Aller a game manager, right? Well, at least Zach and I did. You don't have to be Bryce Young to win a national championship. You don't have to be Joe Burrow to win a national championship today's day and age. JJ McCarthy was probably the best quarterback that's won a national championship since COVID, right? Is Stetson Bennett, JJ McCarthy, and Will Howard. Like, listen, I love Will Howard, and I think Will Howard is a fantastic quarterback, but he doesn't have the tools like some other quarterbacks do, right? I mean, Will Howard is fantastic. JJ McCarthy was more athletic than him. JJ McCarthy didn't fall down, when he was running the ball. Sometimes Will Howard did. He kind of lost some of his mobility a little bit. Now Will Howard, fantastic, accurate, that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I'd take either one of them on my team if I'm trying to win a national championship. And that's all I'm saying is Drew Aller doesn't have to be Bryce Young. He doesn't have to be Joe Burrow. He just needs to be JJ McCarthy-esque, Stetson Bennett-esque, Will Howard-esque. I think he can do that. So, all right, last comment, and then we'll move on. Lance says, "Don't forget to hit the like button." Yes, don't forget to hit the like button.
Makes
Appreciate it,
sense.
Lance. Don't know if we've seen you here before, so if you're a new viewer, we appreciate you being here. Hit the like button and subscribe, everybody. All right, Jeff, your third one.
All right, so I'm sticking to my unders. So this is my last of the unders. So I'm going to go with Rutgers. I know we don't talk a lot of Rutgers here. So they're 5.5. I'm pointing out first, third toughest Big Ten schedule. So last year they had I think they had the second easiest schedule next to Indiana. This year it's the third toughest. 46-35 record of teams that they play this year of what their record was the prior year within the Big Ten. So 11 games over 500. The other thing, they play what I call the Big Three: Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State. 3 losses basically for a team like Rutgers. They just don't beat teams like that. So you're 0-3 right out of the gate, and then they also play Illinois. So for what I would call 4 of the top 6, they don't play Indiana and Michigan, but they play the 3 toughest, and so that makes it tough. Miami, Ohio is the toughest non-conference. So I'm actually assuming they're going to come out of non-conference 3-0, and that's one of the big things. This is all about the schedule, and one of the first things I do is look at non-conference. Are they going to be 3-0, and then what do they need to go from there? They only need to go, if they're 3-0 in non-conference, 3-6 in the Big Ten. But I think they're going to have a hard time getting there. They've got Iowa as well. They're playing at Minnesota, at Washington, at Illinois, and we already said at Ohio State's a loss. So, and I don't see, they do play Purdue, which that could be their cupcake. I wouldn't put Maryland at a cupcake. I know they're on the third line there, but at 4.5 wins, I'm not considering them. And Loxley's recruited talent there. Like they have an experienced quarterback in Calic Manis, but with all that experience, he had experience last year, and they won only 7-5 with an easy schedule. I know they had their injuries last year, but I just don't love that schedule. And I'm putting them at 5-7, just under the 5.5 for an under.
Yeah, my little quick win losses I did here for Rutgers. I had them at 5-7 as well for next season. The only reason I didn't have them as an under was because I didn't see an out of conference game they could lose, and I thought maybe they steal one in conference that gets them to 6 wins. But yeah, it's gonna be tough because they're gonna have to win 3 games in the conference. They can beat Purdue, they can beat Maryland, but I don't know. I don't even know if those are locks wins for them. So,
Yeah, you couldn't say Maryland would be a lot in, Purdue's
well,
a
the only
great
reason I was
number.
going to say Maryland was because it's at home. They
Yeah,
do get them at home.
yeah,
So,
and they do play well at home, but
yeah.
they're not dynamic at home
Yeah.
either.
But other than that, you got a whole bunch of teams on here that could be ranked. I mean, if Iowa beats Iowa State, they could be ranked. If Minnesota beats Cal, they could be ranked. I mean, and as we know, Rutgers doesn't beat ranked teams. That's just it is what it is. Sorry, Rutgers fans. Not trying to dog you. It just is what it is. So, all right. Last lock. Oh, I do have a bonus lock, so I'll give you my last one though. I'm gonna go over Minnesota. Minnesota sitting at 6.5. Jeff, I don't know if you have the schedule thing for them, but I like their out of conference. Buffalo, they got an FCS Northwestern State, I think that is. Cal, and then Cal is on the road, but I don't know. Cal just looks so dismantled from the
They
transfer
lost their
portal.
quarterback to Indiana.
Yeah. They do have Devin Brown from Ohio State, so we'll see. I'm gonna be rooting for Cal this season, but I don't know. It just looks like a terrible situation. So we'll see. But they do have a pretty tough stretch of going Iowa, Michigan State, by Oregon, and Northwestern. That's 3 road games in 5 weeks. Thankfully, they have that bye there. They should get Michigan State and Northwestern, but again, I mean, those are the Northwestern one is a road game, so we'll see. I think Northwestern, or not Northwestern, I think Minnesota is gonna have to probably beat Nebraska to get there. We'll see. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but that's a
It
heated
is at home.
rivalry. So
Yeah.
which one?
Nebraska,
Yeah,
right?
that one's at
Yeah.
home. The
Yeah.
Northwestern one is on the road. So, but even if they lose to Nebraska, they could still beat Michigan State and Northwestern and still get to the 7 wins there. And I think they probably take care of Wisconsin at home at the end of the season if Wisconsin is who we think they are this season. So a lot of it's going to depend on Drake Lindsey. Can Drake Lindsey continue to develop? Can he become a good quarterback? I mean, obviously not become a good quarterback, but can he become a comfortable quarterback? Darius Taylor's going to be huge for him though. Coy Parrish is going to be huge as long as he stays healthy throughout the season. So yeah, I'm going to go over with Minnesota. What do you got on the schedule for them, Jeff?
Yeah, so they were played teams that were 37 and 44. So it's tied for the 5th easiest schedule in the Big Ten, so not too difficult there. That Cal game is going to be huge because if they lose it, they're going to have to go 5-4 in the Big Ten, and that makes just the path much tougher. They do get 5 home games versus the 4 away, so that's a great thing. But again, breaking in a new quarterback, always a tough thing. I'm just huge on the first-year quarterback thing. It's just more of a struggle. So that early win at Cal could cause a lot of confidence in that quarterback, right? Or if it goes south, it could do the opposite thing, and they've got a major problem. So, but I don't have an issue with that. I didn't feel strong one way or another on the over-under for the Gophers.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just saying, people, be prepared for Minnesota to be a top 20 team after week 7. They could be 5-1 after week 7. Heck, they could be 6-1 after week 8. So yeah, don't sleep on Minnesota this season. They've got to figure it out early on. But I like Darius Taylor a lot. I think he's going to bounce back this season, and I think Coy Parrish is going to be really big for him too. As long as Drake Lindsey is who they say he is, we'll see. As long as he is who they say he is, it could be a very good season for Minnesota. Joe asked, does Purdue get to 3 wins? Joe, I thought about Purdue. This one, I just don't know what to make of them. I can't imagine Barry Odom just completely loses everything on the season like Ryan Walters did. Barry Odom's an older coach. He has it together. I mean, Jeff, am I crazy to think they got to get at least 1 Big Ten win this season? Maybe 2. Like, I know that schedule's super difficult. They have at Northwestern, they could get it. Rutgers, I don't know. It's hard finding one. That schedule's really tough.
Yeah. Kind of like with a new coach like that, I just want to. There's some teams I want to avoid betting. Like they were one I wanted to pass on.
Yeah.
Maybe I should save the ones I'm like, just don't even. Too hard to predict because there's too many variables. Don't bet on against Vegas when there's too many variables to factor in. Purdue's one of them. I wouldn't be betting against the 3.5.
Yeah,
One way
I
or
wouldn't
another.
either. I wouldn't either. All right. Last one. This is my bonus, and then we'll get out of here, Jeff. And I'm gonna let you tell me if I'm right or wrong on this one. I'm gonna go with under on UCLA. You were the under king this time, but I'll do an under here. I just UCLA struggling against Fresno State and Hawaii last year is still sticking with me. You know, I know they got Nico. I know Deshaun Foster improved things. Like, I know they got Tino Sinceri. Like, I like what they did this offseason in some ways, but that very first game against Utah, then they go at UNLV. I think some people are sleeping on that game. Like, that is Dan Mullen, right? He's not going to get the best talent to his teams, but boy, does he know how to coach, and boy, does he know how to put together a good offense. So, do they give UCLA's defense trouble? If they lose two out of conference games, Jeff, I don't know how they get. I don't know how they get to 6 wins. Right? I mean, it's not the worst schedule in the Big Ten ever, but it's not. It's definitely not
It's middle of
easy.
the pack schedule. It's 40 and 41 are the teams. So basically it's right in
Yeah.
the middle. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they got Nebraska. Nebraska should be better this year, so that's going to be a tough win if they're going to get that one. They have to go to Northwestern. That's all the way across the country. David Braun's definitely going to be trying to get his guys up for that one, no doubt. I mean Northwestern could be 1-2 going into that game. They could be desperate to try and get a win because they play Oregon and Tulane early on. I mean you could possibly have 1-2 Northwestern going against 1-2 UCLA there in week 4, and I would like Northwestern in that one. That's just me, though.
This is one I put as just avoid this one.
Mm-hmm.
UCLA, now, again, 4 home games versus the 5 away. I always think that's a big deal. I look at that. But with the whole Nico situation, like, how's he going to settle in? And, is he a good teammate and all that? I don't like the variables here. Too many, it's not a returning quarterback. So what do we expect from Nico in this new offensive coordinator is under, a guy from Indiana? How quickly is he going to get up to speed? I put them as under, like, you had under, yeah, too, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I just would avoid this. I would not bet UCLA.
Yeah. Are you avoiding the Nebraska one too?
No, so actually, JR, so I actually had I had my overs. So Nebraska was one of my overs. 5th easiest schedule, 37 and 44 are the records of the teams. Non-conference versus Cincinnati. I think they'll get that one. So I'm assuming they're going to be not 3-0 in non-conference. So they just need to go 5-4 in the Big Ten, and they avoid Oregon, Ohio State, right? Indiana and Illinois. So 4 of the top 6 they avoid, and they're playing like Northwestern, Maryland, UCLA. They're playing 4 of the 7 worst teams, Michigan State, UCLA. So I actually see Nebraska going 8-4 and hitting the over was one of mine.
If
And then
Nebraska doesn't win 8 games this season, I don't know if it will ever happen.
yeah,
I
I
mean,
never
this
say that.
schedule sets up perfect for it, Jeff. I mean, you
Yeah,
got Cincinnati. Yeah, I mean, Michigan. If they have trouble with sanctions or whatever else, I mean, Sherrone Moore's already missing that game. That's happening.
yeah,
We know that for sure. I mean, like
yeah.
the schedule is
Raiola,
made.
year 2, we talked about
Yes,
quarterback jumping. In
that
year
rule
2,
year 3, like
you're going to see him jump. 5 home games, 4 away in the Big Ten. Again, that's a major factor. So I that one I had high confidence for. That's my highest confidence over, I think, was Nebraska.
I've been burned by Nebraska before though, so I don't want to get burned.
You want to hear my 2 quick other overs?
Yeah,
Because
give me them quick, and then we'll get out of here.
okay. USC, so tied for 5th easiest schedule, 37-44 regular teams they play. I know they play Notre Dame, but 5 at home. And then they lost all these 1-score games. I just think the worm will turn on that because they do have a good coaching staff and the D coordinator in his second year. So the defense could take a leap maybe from that. So I like them. And then the third one is we always pile on Mike Loxley. I actually have them as the over.
Nice.
I had them going 6-6, my friend. 10th toughest schedule. So they have in the middle of the road schedule, 39-42, but they avoid playing Penn. They don't play Penn State, Ohio State, and Oregon. The big 3 that, Rutgers plays the big 3. Maryland doesn't play any of those. And those are like losses, right? So they're playing a bunch of teams that can be had. Even in Indiana, is up there, but can Indiana be had? I mean, I went to Indiana. They're not like, it's not like playing Ohio State. It's just not. I'm sorry. Michigan, same thing. Illinois. So those are three of the better teams they're playing, but all those teams have question marks, right? Maybe Indiana least of others, but so I just think Maryland does have a shot. I don't know if they get to 6 wins, but the 5 and also they should be 3-0 in non-conference, which is important. They play Florida Atlantic, Northern Illinois, and Towson. So they're 3-0. They only need to go, think about it, 3-0 non-conference. They only need to go 2-7 in the Big Ten to get the 5 wins. I think they can do that. I have high confidence they get the 5 wins.
Nice. All right.
There
I
we
feel like
go.
I have to do 2 unders now. That you did 3 overs and 3 unders. I feel
I
like I have
thought
to
that
do
was
2
the
more here.
exercise. So, I
Yeah.
broke the rules.
No, you're just an overachiever. Geez. I guess if I had to do another under, it'd probably be Purdue. Oh geez. I don't know.
You don't
I'm not
have
gonna
to.
say Indiana. Indiana fans will hate me if I say under for Indiana. So I'm not gonna say they already hate Zach. I don't wanna make them hate the entire show here. Um, Jeez, I don't know about another under. It'd be bad if I just said both Purdue and Northwestern. I don't think they both go under, but one of them has to, right?
Those are tough
Sorry,
ones.
Purdue fans. Sorry, Nebraska or Northwestern fans.
And by the way, I don't want to touch Ohio State either. Talk about a bunch of unknown, new quarterback, new DC, new offensive coordinator, although Ryan Day is still going to have a big hand in that
Yeah.
game plan, and a bunch of new players. And when it's 10, and it's set at 10.5, when we were like talking earlier, they had this amazing team last year and they only went 10-2. They would have been under last year and they won the national freaking title. So I wouldn't be touching betting Ohio State is the bottom line. I'm not saying beyond that. Just too many variables, too many unknowns.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that I would have to pick if I was going to do a third under, I'd have to pick either Ohio State or Oregon because all 3 of those teams are not all going to go over.
If my life
One
depended
of
on
them
me,
would
I'd
go under.
go under. I'd under if I had to choose for Ohio State, 10-2.
Philip's trying to peer pressure me now. Do it, JR. I can't put it on the graphic. If I say it, I'll have to put it on the graphic, Philip. I can't do that. Yeah, I just made a post the other day about Indiana. The Indiana fans would come at me so hard. Um, you'll find out in the graphic tomorrow. I'll put it on the graphic, and you guys can find out then. So just check Twitter. All right, everybody. We appreciate you being with us. Thanks for being here on the show with me and Jeff. Jeff, great job tonight. Zach will be with us on Tuesday. Jeff, why don't you tell people where they can find your written work at?
So if you could, like me on X at Big Jeff's FT Ball for football. And then I have my bigjeffsfootball.com. I haven't been writing a lot of articles because I've been buying and selling houses literally. But I will get back into that game. This exercise helped, JR, because I'm definitely going to be doing an article on the over and unders and explaining why. So I might change my mind on a few things, but it was a good exercise. So enjoyed being here with you, JR, and hopefully you all found it valuable and interesting.
Oh yeah, always valuable and interesting when you're on, Jeff. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate everybody in the chat, even Philip calling me a chicken right now. Oh, Terry's showing up for the first time. Terry, didn't realize you were here. He says, "Where's Zach? Guard duty at Kent State?" No. I think he's at a retreat again this weekend. Got a lot of retreats for Zach in the end of the school year time because he's wrapping up stuff. He's a campus minister at what is it, Bucknell, I think. So he does a lot of stuff at the end of the school year. So a lot of stuff going on there. Not Kent State. Actually, I think Kent State football's team could beat Bucknell's football team. Maybe.
Funny,
Not sure.
Kent State is KSU, maybe in some ways. I'm wearing a shirt where my son
Oh, there you go.
goes to Kennesaw State. And look, they're the second team Indiana's playing in the non-conference, Kennesaw State. So my son is like, Dad, we got to go on a road trip and everything. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, that'd be a great game to go to. Yeah.
Hey, last time I went to an Indiana game, it was the Ohio State game there, and I saw a fight. So maybe you'll see some Kennesaw State fans get into a fight with
Maybe
Indiana
I'd get in a fight. Yeah, wearing a Kennesaw shirt.
Don't wear that shirt, Jeff. Don't wear that shirt. All right, everybody. We appreciate you being here. Thanks so much. Catch you on Tuesday night with Zach, 9 p.m. Eastern time. Have a good one. See you next time.